the Republic countries they've always done it, but they were like, well, yeah, okay, yeah, and, because they just have always made mead for 1,000 years or more. I mean, Poland's got an almost 1,000-year unbroken history of making mead, which is stunning. Ethiopia, Tej has been around for millennia, I mean, as long as there's been Ethiopians, there's been, there's been Tej. And, but when it took off here in the States, it was like this. It's sweeping up, and while we're still a very small drop in the collective bucket of craft alcoholic beverages, we're picking up speed every single day, and our growth rate is higher than all of the other market segments, including cideries and distilleries, which are also going gangbusters. So, I mean, it's spreading because of, it's a worldwide culture. We all talk in the same forums online and stuff. So, I mean, there really are no country boundaries on, in the digital world. So it would be surprising if it didn't happen because, and especially Australia, you guys have got a vibrant culture that easily accepts new things, is not afraid to try stuff. As a people, if not necessarily as a government, but the people are not afraid to try new things. I mean, look what you guys did in the wine industry. Everybody was like, Australian wine, really? And look, now you're leading the wine industry.
Yeah. Our reds are impeccable in this country. Yeah. What I find really interesting, and you're absolutely right, it's the fastest growing. It's been in a lot of other countries. Tej, like you said. Bees across all continents have always been there. We've always had water. So it's always had that mechanism for beehives to get flooded and to spontaneously combust. So, mead is nearly the only beverage I think that would cross all cultures, would cross all continents, cross all boundaries, because it didn't really need man's intervention to make it. I think that's really exciting. The thing that I find really interesting, and Hamish or maybe some of our listeners, Aussie listeners, might have some input, but Australia, we have 1,500 different types of bees in this country. A lot of those are stingless, a lot of those are native or solitary bees, so they're not that sort of honey bee style, that would set up a swarm or anything like that. I think that maybe nearly Australia would have to be one of the only countries where mead may not be reflected in our history because of the fact that we never had swarming honey bees. Most of ours are solitary now.
We do have a couple that you can get hives off, but they're awfully hard to harvest, so they're more used to assist with fermentation. People sometimes set up hives in their yard to pollination. And so, that's basically the only commercial use for the native beehives that you can get.
The native bees. I mean, I think I said bubble honey before. I think we call it sugar honey. But I'd really love to see if we have any history of making mead in this country, accidentally or deliberetely throughout the eons. But our first Australians. It was all told through story time and storytelling and things like that, so there's not much written history about what they would have done, and obviously since the last couple of 100 years it's got even harder to find out a lot of that information. But
I'd be willing to bet that there was mead being made. I mean, when did Europeans come to Australia?
Officially from
not when they hit it, not when they discovered it. That was 1600s, I know. But when did they start
1780?
Yeah, okay.
1780.
At that point in time, there was still mead in the Western European cultures. It was still there. It had not yet disappeared. It didn't drop off the map here in the States because we officially started getting a reasonable amount of colonization in the in the mid to late 1700s as well, and there are books and recipe collections that have been unearthed from Martha Washington, for instance, wife of the first president of the United States, had mead recipes in her receipt collection. So my thinking is that they probably did exist. Whether or not they got documented, that's another thing. But my guess would be, given the fact that many of the people in your country come from the same place as many of the people in our country did, that was in fact there. And were bees native to Australia before European colonization?
That's
not the
what
European honeybee, no.
Not the European
honey.
But were honey-producing bees there?
Yes.
Okay, so I would be really surprised if the Aborigines did not have some kind of fermented honey product. I'd be real surprised.
Yeah, I'd really want to follow in on that and really go down that avenue. I think that's really important. When we were colonised in 1788, a lot of our endemic or indigenous ingredients and produce and food was sort of scorned. Oh, look, we don't know what that is. We're going to start planting our own foods. And so far, I think mead, as new as it is in this country, has been following on from the footsteps of what other countries are doing, what's happening over in the States and Europe, etc., and the UK, and using those ingredients, using those berries and those types of fruits and using that's close to that type of honey. And we have, in this country, there's a plum named after the area which I live in, the Illawarra plum, that most people haven't even heard of. We've got Kakadu plums, we've got Davison plums, finger limes, like I mentioned before, man. We've got quandongs, which thistles, Suan's playing with, rye berries. We have so many different spices like lemon aspen and lemon myrtles that we can use to showcase our country. And and I literally mean not just our country as our people, our way of life, but our country. That's what we call, the bush. That's what we call outback, is the country. And bring that forward, bring that to the forefront, and let people taste the idea of terroir. Like, what's more local than using 100% local honey, sourcing fruit, and if we even go a crazy step forward and start yeast wrangling a yeast from this area, like, that is tasting the terroir of Australia. That's really important to us, and I think we need to make that a priority in this country to create awareness outside of this country how important and delightful mead can be.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be really. I love that you're doing the Australian only ingredients. I think that's really interesting because it turns mead from a really cool drink into a cultural drink. And and I think that is to a certain extent important. There are a number of meaderies here that are doing the locavore type of mead production, and it highlights the region. I mean, our country, like your country, has so many different climates, and it's big enough that there are so many different things that you can do. I mean,
Yeah, we just don't have a record. We have no one really pushing these boundaries. We've got a couple of little breweries that are doing it now. There's a couple down at Tassie that are really relying on that wild fermentation, that spontaneous fermentation. But really low-key, really small, I think, mead. And the idea of mead can reflect that as well. And that's something that literally, that's one of many pieces of advice that Ken said. He said, look, when you go back home, look at what ingredients you could use, because that's what will separate us and create a standout in the market, is highlighting, wild rosella. That's a bird here, but it's also a plant in wild hibiscus. Let's put mead on the map internationally by showcasing our indigenous and our endemic quality products. I think that's really important, but no one is doing it. We don't have yeast wranglers so much. There was a guy at Tassie, I know you were talking about it last week, you talking about what were you talking about, pepper berries and things like that. There's a yeast guy down at Tassie who would collect pepper berries and the pepper leaves and use them to dry hop his spontaneous brews, and we were looking at doing that with our meads, but he shut down. So it's just creating those relationships. And Australia is as big as the United States. It's a huge country with 10% of the people. So being able to communicate, getting that knowledge across at the moment is really hard. It's really limited. And that's what we're finding in the meat industry. We've got a few guys over in the States, Bartholomew's and Sean at Erosions, a couple guys down at South Australia, Suan, Thistle. You've got Pete Greenwood over at Tassie. You know what I mean? And Steve, we're just so far apart that we really need to form an alliance and create a stronger network of the meat industry so that we can build this platform nationally and then internationally from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be really interesting to see, if using the rising tide floats all boats concept to get the network, especially the up-and-coming meaderies in Australia, because there are a number of them, to create that network of making sure that there's meat available all over Australia, somebody's meat.
Yeah, we've got some thoughts about that. We wouldn't mind even setting up be the middleman distribution point of view. Obviously, what our ultimate aim with Hunter and the Harp from a meadery point of view is to have a readily accessible mead tasting room and a place where you can go in and sample mead and drink mead on site and then take mead to take away. At the moment, it's either a lot of farm gate or self-distributed style. So a lot of the guys we've had on so far, that's how they're sort of managing to keep an industry. I'd like to have a location where you come in, man, and you can taste meads, and then from that point, why not start to showcase the other meaderies in Australia, hey, you want to taste it, and we can learn from that, different honeys. So we had Sean over at WA talking about Jarrah honeys a couple of weeks ago. I've never tasted Jarrah honey. I have no idea what it tastes like, but I'd love to give it a crack. But it's 3,500 kilometres away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just hard at the moment, being such a big country with so little people. But that's where, look, Vicky, AJ Hamish, that's where Got Mead is huge. AWMA, Australian Mead Makers, is huge. A lot of those other locations are really important for us Australians. And, for our home brewers that are listening, you're not alone. It felt like I was alone so much. Like I have a page in my book. I just turned to it now. It's called, I hope I can say this on the radio, it's called Fuck You, Yan. Yan, understanding what use assimilable nitrogen was and then free amino nitrogen and start talking about staggered nutrient additions. It is so hard for our guys to learn about that when there's no knowledge about the ingredients we get. We don't get fermate K, which is where a lot of it comes from. We can get fermate O, but most of it's fermate A. So then to teach yourself, well, what is yan? How do I find out what free amino nitrogens are in the yeasts, and then work out, do I want 100 or 200 or 400 parts per million of yeast assimilable nitrogen? It's just so difficult, but we're not alone. And, using sources like Got Me was really good for me. A lot of the names now, from the handles, I know who they are in real life. I've never met them, but I understand who they are. Kuda Cat is one of them. I think that's how you say your name, Hamish. Kuda Cat.
It left out a syllable, but yeah, it's could have put you, but yeah.
Not even close. I can get Chevette Girl right though, surely. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. And I think Manny, so that's even easy for me to not fuck up. But we aren't isolated as much as it feels like we are in this country. We just need to start asking the right questions from each other. And someone somewhere has spent countless hours trying to learn it themselves. And together, when we come together as a composite unit, when we come together as a team, we will start to just nail this idea of making quality modern mead in Australia.
You sound like you're the voice of Australian commercial meat. I love it.
Right, one day we're not even a commercial meadery at the moment, so we've taken a bit of a step back. My partner Nerida thinks we'll have our third baby this Friday, so that's only 2 days away. But down the line, we will proudly speak for as many mead makers as will allow us to, I guess.
Well, in the meantime, it's not like you can't be out there promoting mead as a drink, whether you're making it at home or making it commercially. It's the awareness factor that changes everything. I mean, ours, we limped along for years, and at some point, we hit that tipping point, and now it's just going like crazy. It's, you know, it's just going nuts. So, you know, I mean, it's and given the fact that y'all have, you know, a smaller population